Oh, hello, everybody. If you don't like slideshows of people's vacation, this would be a good time to leave. I've been thinking about doing this for quite some time, and I thought I would give it a try on this particular set of photographs. All this is going to be is a slideshow, basically, with me talking over it. The first picture here is the wall of an apartment building in Béziers in southern France, but more on Béziers in southern France later. I just wanted to start by explaining what it is that I'm going to be doing here. 2010, I spent most of the winter in France, all of February and March, and came home in early April sometime. I spent a month in Béziers, which is very close to the Mediterranean. The coldest winter on record, that close to the Mediterranean. If they blamed it on the Canadian in the neighborhood or not. And then after having spent a month there, I met a friend of mine, and we walked part of the Voie de Puy, the Puy route, one of the Camino routes in France. I've already walked the Camino across northern Spain, and I walked part of the Vézelay route in France, and I wanted to walk the Le Puy route, but I'll tell you more about that later on, and the reason why I only got a chance to walk part of it. But we'll begin by saying that I flew into Paris, and two friends of mine met me there, Prue and Yvonne, at the airport, even though I was only going to be there at the airport for a short time because I was taking the TGV, the Train de Grande Vitesse, the rapid train down to southern France, but I had an hour or two at the airport, and they very kindly drove in and met me. It was snowing in Paris, bitter cold, especially in the train station part of the airport, which is open to the elements. But anyway, we had a nice visit there, and then I got on my train, and I spent about 4 hours, I think it took to go the length of France, 4 or 5 hours. Very fast train. It only stopped at one or two major cities along the way. And I arrived in Béziers, where I had an apartment rented for a month. I just love the building that we're looking at here. That was discovered several days after I arrived, out for a walk around the village, because of course, am a gardener, and this is the spirit of a true gardener. Whoever lives in that apartment didn't have a square inch of ground to plant anything on, and they planted the entire side of the building. So we'll carry on with the rest of my story here, and hopefully this doesn't put you to sleep immediately anyway. Well, to get started on our little tour of Béziers, this is the cathedral, medieval cathedral, the Cathedral de Saint-Just, Saint Just. I'm not familiar with who Saint Just might be, but it was a very beautiful building. I took a few photographs around it in different locations. This is sort of behind it. Would be behind the main altar at the back of the cathedral. And the next photo coming up here is called the Bishop's Garden. And of course, being a cathedral, it is the seat of a bishop, but I'm not quite sure why the garden got named the Bishop's Garden. It's just a little typical French garden, not a lot of flowers. Two places on the side of the cathedral I found the mason's marks in the stone. This was how a mason got paid for his work. They marked each stone, and when they were set, they were counted, and the mason got paid according to how many stones he cut and set. The next photo coming here is just another picture from the exterior. I was sort of trying to get artistic, I think, taking a photograph through an archway sort of thing. And to close off the little section on the Cathedral de Saint-Just, there are two shots from the interior. Very beautiful church. What I like best about France is the food. Cheese in particular. I make my own cheese and I love cheese. These are both goat cheeses and both very good. Just out my front door and to the right a few steps is this bakery, probably the best bakery in the city. And it's a bakery, patisserie, bread and pastries both. I spent a lot of time in there. That is a pain au raisin sec, a bread made with raisins. Delicious, wonderful filling in it. I'll look at my shopping for the morning there. I've been to the market as well as the bakery and the cheese shop. When you buy something special at that particular bakery, it gets packaged very specially for you. This is one little cake that you'll see here in a second. Peeking down in there. A little pastry. I couldn't get over how they put it in a little box and wrapped it and put a ribbon on it before they gave it to me. It has what looks like an espresso bean to me on the top of it, so perhaps it was coffee flavored. I don't remember. Too long ago, I guess. Other than I'm absolutely certain it was delicious. Everything that came out of that bakery was delicious. I got my daily bread there every day. And the next picture here is a couple of pictures inside the Béziers market. Fresh market, open I think 7 days a week. I don't think I ever went there when it wasn't open anyway. All kinds of wonderful fresh produce, and I think that right in front of you there is a large cheese display. And yes, I did buy some. I can't remember if I had to cook them. They were cured in salt and something else, whatever made them sort of red there. I had to try it. In the very front of this display, that's probably bacalao, salt cod, dried salt cod. I spent the next couple of days just wandering around and enjoying the old city, discovering things as I went. This is the old bridge. It's now just a pedestrian bridge across the River Orbe. And it's Romanesque, but it isn't Roman. It dates from the Middle Ages rather than the Roman era. And the Canal du Midi goes through Béziers. It's the canal that connects the Atlantic with the Mediterranean. And there'll be more of that later on, as in preparation for my longer walk on the Voie de Puy, I walked along the canal to the Mediterranean at Sète. Lots of nice pictures of that coming up. Prue was able to come down for a couple of days, I think en route to visiting with her daughter, Lisa, who is a doctor and lives in La Ciotat, next to Marseille on the Mediterranean. So she stopped off for a couple of days in Béziers, and we rented a car and had a great time. The first day with the rented car, we drove to La Couvette-Toirade, which always brings back a bit of a funny story when I think about it. Prue, who is a polyglot, someone who speaks more than two languages. She speaks English, French, and Spanish fluently. Had great trouble with that name. She would get out part of it, and I would finish it. So it's a Templar castle, Knights Templar, and village, which is pretty much as it was when the Templars lived there. Unfortunately, the day that we were there, it was early in the spring, and all the attractions, including the castle, were closed, and it was thick fog, which I think made the photographs of the castle and the village much more interesting than if it was a bright sunny day. A lot of the houses in the village had one of these on their door. It's a special kind of thistle blossom that's been dried, and it works as a weather predictor. If it's going to rain, the thistle blossom opens up when the air is moist enough, Evidently the fog that day wasn't moist enough to open it, because this one looks closed to me. And if it's going to be warm and sunny and dry, the thistle blossom closes. Far too large to have brought one home in my suitcase, but it interested me. Later the same day, we visited the village of Roquefort, famous for Roquefort cheese, and had a tour of one of the Roquefort caves. Not actually a cave, as you might think, in a rock, but it's a place where the Roquefort is aged. It was early in the spring, and there wasn't a great deal of cheese to be viewed, but it was a very interesting experience. I was so surprised to learn that it's only several months old when it's ready to be sold. It isn't aged very long at all. And we didn't even get a taste, but we went to a special shop and bought one of the cheeses that was made by the same company that we had visited. There are 3 or 4 different companies that make Roquefort in the region there. On the way back home, it had changed to mostly rain, but we did a side trip to see the viaduct at Millau. I had seen a documentary on the making of the thing, and it is just amazing how it was done. This photograph doesn't show all of it. That's roughly half of it. I didn't have a camera that would take a wide enough angle picture to get the whole thing in. Prue offered to drive me across. I said, no, thank you. I'll look at it from down here in the valley. It's over a mile long. It goes from one mountaintop to another mountaintop across a steep valley. Very interesting, but not for me. Day 2 with the rented car, which was February 5th, we drove on to explore the abbey town of Saint-Guillaume-le-Désert, a tiny little town on the hills, overlooking a nice stream or a river. I'm not quite sure which it was. I don't have very many pictures of the abbey, as you will see coming up here. I only have one that I'm showing, but I think there are more. I just don't know where to find them. The abbey was from the 9th century to the 11th century, what the sign is saying. This is just a feature of one of the columns on the side of the abbey. I don't think we went inside. That might be why. I think it was closed, only open in a certain season. This is a river, or the stream, mountain stream, that goes through the village. We had a picnic lunch next to it. We had stopped at the market before we left Béziers, and as I said before, I love the food in France. These are all just cold items that you could pick up at the market and have for a picnic. The orange thing at the top is a carrot salad that Prue's particularly fond of, and I enjoyed it as well. Weather forecasting in France is almost as accurate as it is here. After that foggy day yesterday, the forecast gave 3 or 4 days of rain, and as you can see, it turned out to be a beautiful sunny day. That was the town of Sète on the Mediterranean that you just looked at, and these are some pictures taken of the sea. I still have on my coffee table 4 or 5 shells that I picked up that day. More about Sète later on in the video here. Sète is where the Canal du Midi terminates, and as I said before, I walked there from Béziers. Almost reminded me of Venice. You could pull your boat up and dock next to the shops or whatever. The following day we went to Carcassonne to see the restored medieval castle, and the town wall is also a restoration. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of criticism about it because it is restored. A lot of people say it looks like a Disney park. It's very interesting to see, and I think it's probably fairly accurate as to what it looks like when it was first built. Always wanted to get there anyway, and I finally made it. It does look like it's quite new after the restoration. Later on in the day, we drove to the seaside town of Collioure. which is close to the Spanish border. Beautiful little town. First time I'd ever encountered these. Metal frames sprayed gold on posts so you could take your picture through it, and you'd end up having your photograph look like it was already framed. A bit crazy, but I had to take one just to see what it would look like. This is a typical fishing boat of the area, no longer used. This is a restoration also. Beautiful little town, lots of colorful buildings. I've been off taking pictures, and that's my only photo of Prue, I hope patiently waiting for me to return. Well, the next day, Prue terminated her part of the journey and continued on by train, and I continued walking around exploring the town. This is down at the Canal du Midi again, and this area is called the Neuf Escaliers. Literal translation would be 9 stairs. It's 9 locks, what we would call them. The grade of the canal changes greatly at that area, and so you would either be lowered down to a lower area through the 9 locks, or you would go up through the 9 locks to get to the higher area of the canal. The canal is a very beautiful area, and you will see more of it when I walk the canal, but I wanted to show you these few pictures. These are taken right around Béziers in the town, various places where you come across the canal. And this is the Béziers Arena, and I never did find out if it's a bullfighting arena or not. That's what it looks like. They do have a version of bloodless bullfighting in southern France. I came across another smaller version of it someplace else. I do not go to bullfights anymore. I never went to one in Spain because I know that they kill the bull in front of you. I got tricked into going to one in Portugal, where they told me that they don't kill the bull. Well, I think the poor old bull wished somebody would kill him before it was over with. Blood running down his shoulders from the picadors sticking their spears into the poor thing. I'm sure the only thing they could possibly do with it when the fight is over is take it out back and butcher it. When I first saw this, I thought, well, they've hung the poor little red dwarf on the side of the building. But Prue later explained to me that that's how they tell children, that's how Santa gets into their apartment. He climbs up and goes in over the balcony. I saw them several places before the trip was over. Béziers has a weekly flower market, which kept getting better every week that I was there. I think it's on Fridays. Beautiful. I'm not sure. I think these photos were taken quite early in my stay, but I've got some more that I'll add a little bit later on here. And I bought at the market Mimosa, which is what the yellow is. And if this thing zooms down far enough, next to it is a little pot of miniature daffodils that hadn't bloomed in this picture, but they bloomed before I left the apartment. What's interesting about this is that window. It's my window in the kitchen over the sink, but it looks out on the street. And directly across the narrow street is another apartment building. And there's an elderly lady that had an apartment at the same level as mine. I had to try to stay away from this window because every time I went past the window, if she saw me, she ran around closing all the curtains in her apartment. This is the area where they have the flower market, a day without the market. It's called in LA. It's a long, narrow area, pedestrian lined on both sides with plane trees, which would be much appreciated in their hot summer when they're leaved out. And these photographs are taken at night at the same area. There's a theater at one end, and some of the shops that are down along the side of the LA. That's the theater again. This is a memorial to Jean Moulin, the resistance spy fighter during the German occupation of France in the Second World War. He was captured by the Gestapo and tortured to death, but he's from Béziers. You may have seen movies with Jean Moulin in them. There are several movies that depict his heroism. At the base of the memorial is this little urn, which, as the sign says, or the wording on it says, contains soil from the place where he was murdered. And guess what? I went shopping again for food. Probably I had been back to the market, the fresh market. Wonderful selection, and I'm sure that bread came from just across the street. One of my favorite activities whenever I'm traveling somewhere in Europe is window shopping. I love the antique stores and the art shops. My big weakness is I want to buy everything that I see. Coming right up here in this next slide, you see the small little still life picture, lower sort of right there. Well, I broke down before I left Béziers and went and bought the thing. They were asking 90 euros for it, and the man accepted my offer of 80 euros. I don't remember what I paid to have it framed when I got back home, but probably almost that much again, because I had it framed very beautifully at a frame shop, and it hangs with pride in my dining room. It's on wood, an oil painting on wood, not signed, and the dealer said he felt it probably dated from the earlier part of the 20th century. I really love the thing, and it was a great souvenir. Two friends of my landlord, the man that I rented the apartment from, were going to Rockburn for the Mimosa Festival, the annual Mimosa Festival on Valentine's Day. It's just the ladies selling mimosa blossoms. It was a great day. I really enjoyed it. Lovely little town. Lots of things of interest. And it was right on a river as well. I'm not sure if that's still the Orbe or not that goes through Béziers. It had been so cold. As I said, the coldest winter on record, I guess, for that part of Europe. There were very few mimosas in bloom. Did manage to find one in the town up against a wall that was in bloom. I'm not sure where they got all of the flowers that they were selling. It didn't seem to be any place locally where you could pick them. It's a great day. It's like a carnival atmosphere, street food and special stalls like a market, special market day and whatever. And that would be spring garlic, first garlic of the year. And cheese, wonderful cheese. I don't know what these ones were. I didn't buy any of it. I couldn't get over the size of them, though. I bought cheese from the guy in the hoodie. Funny thing, you see these people all over different towns. It's the same market. It just travels from town to town. This is the cheese that I bought, and if you saw my failed video on making Tom cheese, I'm quite sure that's what that was. That was a Tom cheese. And I had a hard time convincing him to sell me the old gnarly piece that you saw there, because that's the one that I wanted to try. He kept wanting me to buy a younger one. Well, I bought it, and I enjoyed it after I got back home. A few days later, the market day in Béziers, there he was again, because as I said, these guys travel from town to town, and he recognized me and wanted to know what I thought of that cheese. On the 16th, me and my shadow started the walk from Béziers to Sète on the Mediterranean. It took 2.5 days. I stayed 2 nights in two different little towns along the way, and on the third day I arrived in Sète. It was a practice walk for my beginning of the Le Puy walk in a few weeks' time, or a few days' time, I guess, after this, really. And I went with full backpack, even though I didn't need all of that for the 3-day walk. I just wanted to make sure that I could handle what I was going to have to be carrying across France from Le Puy. It was fairly chilly most of the time, but carrying a big backpack, you don't seem to mind it quite so much. This was interesting. This is where the canal crosses the Orbe, the river. It seemed kind of strange to see a waterway crossing another waterway, but I walked along the sidewalk along the side of it there to get over the river. Someplace where they store all of their boats along the canal for the winter, I guess. This is very interesting. You see this in Spain a lot, but I had never seen one in France before. It's an advertisement, no words, just a big bowl. It's an advertisement for a very famous Spanish sherry called Toro. I'll let a lot of these slides just go by without commenting on them directly anyway. As I said, I took 3 days, 2 nights to do the walk. So I stayed in a couple of small towns overnight along the way. An interesting thing, I had a guidebook that I had brought with me about the Canal du Midi, and I was following it because there is a place along the canal where you have to be on a certain side of the canal, or you won't be able to carry on. You walk for several miles on that side, and then there is a place where the trail sort of ends along the canal, and you have to go off to the left and walk along a highway for a while. Well, for the longest time, I was watching this couple on the opposite side, and I kept thinking, I hope I'm on the correct side, and I hope those are just folks from the local area that are out for a walk. But when we got to the place where everything ends, and I took off to the left to go on the highway, I noticed they turned around and went back. Later on that night, I met them in a hotel, and they were trying to do the same thing I was doing. They just didn't have the guidebook. Well, after 2.5 days of walking, I arrived in Sète and went almost immediately to the train station, bought a ticket, and returned to Béziers because I had made plans to come back in a couple of days and explore the area. But after all that walking, I was tired and wanted to get back to my apartment. I had walked about 25 kilometers a day on average. No blisters, no sore feet. So I was quite pleased and felt that I was ready and prepared to do the Le Puy route in a few days' time. A couple of days later, I took the train back down to Sète and spent the afternoon. Gorgeous day. This guy is bringing in the day's harvest of mussels so they can sell moules frites along the seashore. France is a dog country, and I love that. This was 3 ladies out walking their dogs in the afternoon. I asked permission to take a photograph. Beautiful sand beach reminded me of home. A bit warmer than it would have been back home. And coming up here are a few slides of 2 men doing, I don't know what you call it, parasurfing maybe? I don't know what it's called, but sort of like a kite surfing maybe, a big kite in the air, and they're down on surfboards going through incredibly rough water. It was fascinating. Nothing I would ever want to try myself, but it was fascinating. I think the last picture of them here, yeah, you just can see one of the boards straight in the air. That guy had wiped out. Last look at Sète before I left for the day. For my last day trip out of Béziers, I took the train to Montpellier for the day and was greeted by something from Canada. That tram is made by Bombardier, a Canadian company, more known for their aeroplanes now, but they started making snowmobiles, and they make trains and airplanes. It's a beautiful city. I had never been there before, of course, but only spent the afternoon exploring, looking around, but it's a lovely city. I'll leave it to you to guess what the guy on the motorbike does for a living. Let's just say they have a lot of dogs, and he's driving a large vacuum cleaner. Jardin des Plantes, which might sound like it's obvious, a garden with plants, but a garden with plants, and Jardin des Plantes is a medicinal garden, a botanical medicinal garden. This one was very interesting. Bamboo, I hadn't seen bamboo growing in a long time. Supposedly everything in the garden has a medicinal use. Mimosa, once again. Coming up in a second here is a bust of Charles de Gaulle. Vive le Québec libre. If you're not Canadian, you may not understand that. In centennial year, de Gaulle visited Canada and from a balcony in Quebec City said, Vive le Québec libre, long live free Quebec. Our current Prime Minister's father was Prime Minister then, Pierre Trudeau, and he asked de Gaulle to please return to France, and he did. Just carrying on with a few more pictures taken around Montpellier before I had to catch my train back to Béziers. This is an Ibis hotel. Most unusual architecture I'd ever seen for an hotel. Nice balconies that all seem to have greenery growing on them. I wished I'd stayed there. I think that was an opera house, I'm not 100% sure. And the last photo is the carousel. See a lot of carousels in towns in France for some reason. Soon the 27th of February rolled around and it was time to leave Béziers and start my walk on the Le Puy route. However, I had been in conversation with Prue a couple of times over the past 10 days or so, and she had been in contact with the Pilgrim office at Le Puy. Le Puy is on a high plateau called the Le Brac, and there had been so much snow there this winter that the office was telling people, no, it just is not safe to walk from Le Puy, so we had to look for another starting point. This, by the way, what you're looking at is a little statue of St. James, St. Jacques, or Santiago, whoever you want to call him. All roads on the various caminos lead to Spain and to Santiago de Compostela, the town at the end of the Camino, where the remains of St. James are. Where was I and what was I talking about? I guess we were going to decide where we were going to walk from, and we thought we would start at Le Conque, which is a beautiful monastery town. But the closest place you can to get there to is Saint Christophe by train. Then you'd have to take a taxi over. So we agreed that that's what we would do. Arranged to meet at the train station. Prue coming in on a train from Paris and me coming in on a train from Béziers. I had a couple hours wait after I got there. However, I managed to lose my what I call my man purse, a shoulder bag, canvas bag that I had my camera in and my passport and the little diary book that I was writing as I went and various other things. I was on the train approaching Saint Christophe, and I just didn't know that we were that close, I guess. I thought it had a longer train ride. And all of a sudden the little whistle stopped, and you had to get up and get off quickly because it's just a little whistle stop. They don't stay there for any more than 2 or 3 minutes. And I left it behind. Well, I was very upset, of course. The little train station has one employee, a man who was very busy doing all the things that he had to do for trains coming through and whatever, the only worker there, but he could tell that I was upset and we got talking about it. He got on the phone and phoned ahead to the next stop for the train and asked them to check my seat and compartment that I was in. A little while later, the phone rang, and it was that station saying yes, the bag was sitting right where I'd left it on the seat, and they had it. I'm telling you, the French train rail service gives wonderful service. They kept that at that station, and moved it twice for me. I kept trying to catch up with it along the line somewhere where I could get it, and they moved it twice until the second time I was able to get there after a day's walking. I walked an extra hour to find the train station and picked up my bag. Everything was in it just the same as when I left it on the train. Unfortunately, with no camera, there are no photographs of Conques. And it's, if you're ever in the area, well worth going to see. A beautiful little town with a huge monastery, and we stayed at the monastery. All the priests and monks or whatever were away on a retreat somewhere else, and there was just left one lay person behind to run the establishment. He fed us while we were there and everything. It was just a wonderful experience, but as I said, I did not catch up with my camera for 2 or 3 more days, so the photographs that follow were all taken later on. I won't go into any great detail of what most of them are. It's just pictures that I took along the way, so I'll let this go by a little bit faster. Crew ahead of me on the trail. Sometimes you're walking on a trail through the woods. Other times you're walking along a roadside. All the area is marked with little red over white markings everywhere. So it's possible to get lost, but it's not easy to get lost. Just a picture inside of one of the places where we stayed. Back out in the countryside again in these ones. That's a lavoir. Outside of a lot of towns you find a lavoir. It's where they used to wash their laundry prior to the electric age and washing machines. I have a thing about them. I take pictures of them all the time. This is an asparagus farm growing asparagus under plastic. That's a dolmen, medieval at least, I guess. And along the Camino, no matter where you're walking, you find these places where walkers have piled up stones. I've never added a stone. That's another lavoir. Another place where we stayed. Accommodation is much better in France than it is on the Spanish Camino, but also you pay more money for it. Not terribly expensive, but a lot more than what you pay in Spain. Chemin de Saint-Jacques, that's what we're walking on. I don't know, just a roundabout in a little town somewhere, I guess. This is Cahors, where we had ice in the fountains and light snow, and learned that down south in Béziers, where I had spent the previous month, they had heavy snow. It might have been cold, but they had a wonderful bakery. Cahors is famous for its medieval fortified bridge. Just a pedestrian bridge now. It looked plenty sturdy enough that it could still take vehicle traffic, but I guess they're concerned about damage to it. Quite an amazing structure. A little roadside chapel. Very small but beautiful inside. The stained glass was, I guess, to me it looked very modern anyway, but really nice. The colors were so vivid. Snow and ice one day, and the next day we found almond trees in bloom. Walked through some beautiful countryside. Lots of sheep. Another one of the places where we spent the night. Stopping so a lady on horseback could ride past us. I guess it's a grain storage on stilts so the rats can't get your grain, I guess. Just some of the interesting architecture. This fascinated me. It was the corner of a parking lot, and they made it look like it had rolled up. The last 2 pictures here are from Moissac, And that was the end of Prue's walk for that particular time anyway. She had to get back on the train and go back to Paris. She had other commitments. This was March 13th. I continued walking alone for another 2 weeks. That was a restored medieval marketplace. I managed to find another canal. Not the Canal du Midi, but another canal. Private chateau. Another chateau. This was a place that accepted pilgrims to stay for the night. They let you know by having a pair of walking boots hung out. More asparagus. France loves their white asparagus. Some beautiful spots along the way. This area reminded me of Spain from walking the Camino in Spain. Beautiful countryside. Well, for anybody who is still awake, we are almost at the end of this journey. I'm in the beautiful Basque country now, southern France, walking towards Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. I felt sorry for this poor little lamb. It was getting close to Easter, and he was all alone in a fenced-in yard. I'm quite sure he was going to be Easter dinner. Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in English is St. John at the foot of the pass, and that is where the Camino Frances, the Camino that goes across Spain, traditionally starts. You start there and walk over the Pyrenees into Spain. It's where I'm going to be terminating. I have already been over the Pyrenees and into Spain on a different walk. Goats. I love goats. My walk will terminate almost exactly at the end of March. I think the 29th or 30th or whatever of March. It took a month to walk from Conques to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. Unfortunately, once I got there, I contacted the Camino office in Le Puy and asked if it was possible to return and walk the Le Puy section that I missed, and the lady said, no, it's still very dangerous. And when I said, is nobody doing it? She said, well, some young people are doing it. I think she could tell from my voice I'm not a young person. That's another Lavoie that we're looking at there. I have a thing about donkeys. I shared my lunch, apples in particular, with many donkeys along the way. A mother hen and her chicks. Lots of sheep. Basque cheese is made, famous Basque cheese, Petit Basque, is made with sheep's milk. Another little chateau that I thought I might like to buy sometime. Haha. The first time I saw a sign warning about a Passage Canadien was on a previous walk in France on the Vézelay route. I had no idea what to expect. When I got there, what they're talking about is a cattle grate in the road. So why they blame a cattle grate on us, I don't know. And this is the weary pilgrim at the end of a month's walking at the gate going into Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, where my walk ended and a lot of other walks begin. From here I did some traveling. I had 16 days yet to go. My flight home wasn't until the 16th of April, so I did some traveling. I went to northern France up to Vimy Ridge and saw the Canadian War Memorial there. I went from there to Brussels in Belgium, and then I went back and stayed in Paris for a while. Prue had to fly over to the U.S. Her mother, very elderly lady, was not very well. So I met up with Prue's husband, Yvonne, and we spent the day at Versailles and had dinner and all that good stuff, and then I flew back home to Canada on the 16th. But I'll save all that for another video. This one is already far too long. Well, thank you very much for watching if you survived all the way through to the end.